So thank you so much for the opportunity, Raymond. So I'm from Indonesia originally, and I've been in Japan for the past 5 years, and I'm now currently a master's student. I don't think I should have introduced myself. I have a slide for that. I'm gonna move on. So, oh, sorry. Okay. So just quite the opposite of what Rinka was saying. I actually wanted to say that if we look at these images, oh sorry Raymond, can I reset the time?
Oh, sure.
Hey. So if you look at these images, like from the moment we could mark a shadow on stone, on a stone, the Stonehenge, we've been like obsessed with time and calculating time. We've even built like monuments and like intricate machines to like contain time, and now we even wear time on our wrists and carry it around in our pockets. And even in Japan, I think you say that time is like a measure of respect. So we've always been very obsessed with the concept of time, and we're constantly like racing against it, and we're also constantly like trying to save it, like being more efficient and being more efficient, and we worry so much about like wasting time. But I hope the physicists are not here, but but I just hope that what if actually time is contained like within us, theoretically. I hope there are no physicists. So, because the truth is that before any sort of concept of time is invented, like our bodies actually already contain time, and our bodies have already mastered time. And we're kind of like living expressions of time, actually. And one of the most accurate most accurate clocks is our bodies itself. So, and it's ticking away at this moment inside all your cells. So today I want to show you how these cellular clocks don't just tell time, but they can use the time to almost do like time travel. And when this time travel goes right, it's the essence of health and also the essence of curing yourself. And when it goes wrong, it's actually the root of disease. Sorry. So, a little bit about me. So I mentioned that I was from Indonesia, and I came to Japan about 5 years ago, and I'm studying in the Faculty of Agriculture in the Laboratory of Genome Chemistry Engineering. And my hobbies besides school, I guess, is I love crafts, so I love crocheting, knitting, like a little bit of just making things, like DIYing stuff at home. And I love food, so Fukuoka is amazing. And I love sporty adventure, so I love to hike, and I like going around to different places in Japan and Kyushu. So I put a picture besides myself, which is of my Emma. So Emma is how I call my grandma. She was influenced by we were influenced by the Dutch colonization in Indonesia, so I think in Dutch it's also called Emma or something like that. So I call her Emma as well. So she died like 2016 from Alzheimer's. So a lot of times, I think when deciding about what I wanted to be in my future, I wanted to kind of just like reverse time to be able to spend more time with her. There's a lot of regrets because I was quite young when she died. And I wanted to find a way to reverse time, kind of, to get her back, kind of. So as a scientist, I know that you can't reverse a life, but in the lab I discovered that there's something that you can do, and I turned that grief into some sort of purpose. And I learned that within ourselves, there's the idea of reversing time. And it's not actually fantasy, but it's actually like a biological process that happens all the time. So we can't bring back the past, but we actually now are learning to read the instructions of like a cell's clock and literally reprogramming the age of the cells itself. So, okay, I'm just gonna go explain a little bit. So what are biological clocks? So you can see this orchestra here. So think of your body not as like having like a one timer that controls the whole clock in our body, but rather like a perfectly synchronized orchestra. So in the brain we have what's called a suprachiasmatic nucleus. So I'm just gonna call it SCN. And then it catches the light from your eyes actually, so from sunlight. And it sets the tempo for your entire body. And then the tempo is then picked up by the different organs in our body, like the different systems. So for example, the liver has its own metabolic clock, and then the heart also has its own. And it's synced to like a daily cycle, almost like a wave of rest and activity, constantly on a 24-hour clock. So this is very important, and this is what's called the circadian rhythm. And molecular timing is the machinery that actually executes the circadian rhythm. So yeah, this is basically how our cells regulate itself. So this is going a little bit more deep into it, I guess. Like there's a lot of things that's going on, but essentially, like these two genes right here is the most important, I would say. So when the SCN catches light, they basically turn these two genes on. It's called the BMAL1 and the clock gene. And then they connect to what's called an e-box. So an e-box is like a specific DNA pattern that basically acts like a switch to let the genes know whether it's daytime or it's nighttime or when to turn on and off things. And this happens throughout your cells in your body. First in the brain, and then it kind of reverberates through a set of hormones all throughout your cells. And that's the mechanism of the circadian rhythm. And the one on the right, I attached like an experiment by a professor called Joseph Takahashi. So he is a Japanese-American neurobiologist as well as a geneticist at the University of Texas Southwestern. So basically what he did was he got a bunch of volunteers to conduct an experiment where they put them inside a room, and they basically just asked them to stay in that room for a couple of days, almost a month, yeah. And for half that time, they were put in isolation where there's no sunlight. They just draped over like windows. And in the beginning, before they were in isolation, you can kind of see that they're sleeping and their bodies are regulating the right time. But then like after isolation, actually their body cycles changed. Like not in complete chaos where the body just like flops and can't function, but rather in like, you can see that rather than working in 24-hour cycles, they start working in 25.4 hours. So that's how the body started thinking that one day is equivalent to 25.4 hours because there's no light, there wasn't any stimulus. And then as soon as they were put out of isolation, the body started regulating itself again. So yeah, I just think that that's really interesting. And this is like a diagram of what the molecular timing looks like in our body. So it looks really pretty actually, but these different waves, like below these waves, or not waves I guess, like these shapes are particular genes on like when they actually activate, like the level at which they activate throughout the day. And you can see like they kind of work in a cycle. Like all the genes in our body work in a cycle kind of. The one on the right also shows us like how the SCN works, and then the lungs kind of just like reply to what the SCN follows and just works in like a cycle, as well as the liver and like the other organs in our body. So the daily rhythm is actually very, very important and the foundation of our health. But what happens when the timing goes wrong in the body? So like I make a diagram like this, saying that like basically there's a lot of distractions in our world. There's a lot of input from environment. So like let's say that the conductor is hungry and sees like a bunch of burgers around him, and of course he'll miss the beat, and then the entire biological orchestra will turn into some sort of chaos. Like it won't sync up. So, and when they don't sync, this is when trouble happens in our body. So as much as like time is such a beautiful thing in the body, it can also be our worst enemy. So we see this very starkly in like the most popular disease, probably like the first in like cancer cells. So like in cancer cells, the clock isn't broken. It's just like basically like hijacked. They're saying like you gotta divide now always. Like there's no biological clock at all in those cells. All they do is they just want to multiply. And of course, when things are out of order, they turn into disease, cancer. And in Alzheimer's, it's a different type of tragedy. It's like it's where the 24-hour rhythm starts unraveling, and usually one of the earliest symptoms is that Alzheimer's patient, they exhibit like sleep deprivations, or they are not able to sleep properly. So this allows the body, this actually causes the body to not be able to dispose of the toxins that actually form in the brain, and this leads to like a vicious cycle basically. So like poor sleep causes a disruption to clock, and then the disruption to clock causes the accumulation of the beta amyloid proteins, which then causes disease. So it's basically, Alzheimer's is one of the causes, one of the effects of the disruption in this like cycle in our body, which shows just how it's truly a double-edged sword. I think time, it can be like something very beautiful, but yet at the same time it's also like, sorry about this.
This is a bad time.
So I just want to show that, in our bodies, cells work with a molecular time, like in waves, specifically according to the solar energetic cycle. So as I mentioned before, from the SCN, because of the light that the light stimulus that we receive, the SCN will make a response, and then it will just escalate from there to other cells. So this is the wave that I mentioned. So this is what a harmonious cycle look like, and then the other one is when things go out of sync, and the body no longer clears waste properly and causes oxidative stress buildup, as well as immune response flare-ups, which is basically the start of the disease formation. So other than that, I want to talk a little bit about what's called epigenetics. So I was talking about the 24-hour rhythm in our body, right? But I want to talk about what's called the epigenetic clock, which is, it's not really measured in hours, but I would say it's measured in a lifetime, kind of. So the epigenetics is a system where there are chemical markers or tags that sit on top of your DNA that alters, but not actually altering the actual genetic code, but they control the genes which are turned on and which are turned off. And for example, they can tell a liver cell that, oh, you're a liver cell, or like eye cell that, oh, you're an eye cell. So this is called epigenetics. And you can think of it like the DNA as a hardware, but then epigenetics is like the software. But then like if like earlier from the diagram, like the burgers and everything, that's like the environmental input. And then if something happens between that, the software basically messes up, and this screw up gets accumulated in your life. So it's basically like a timestamp of what happens in your life. And so every stress, every detail, every poor sleep of your night, kind of like, or every little toxin, kind of like leaves a small fingerprint, molecular fingerprint in your epigenetics. So yeah, actually it's a very interesting topic nowadays. I think a lot of people are interested in this. And for a long time, we thought that the epigenetic clock in our body is like a one-way thing. But actually, I think that nowadays, like in the past 10 or 20 years, we're finally realizing that actually there are roles to who creates the epigenetic markers and who edits these epigenetic markers. And so one thing that I want to share to you guys is kind of related to my research. I research on microRNA, so I'm going to show you guys what microRNA says. So yeah, cells do travel in time. So if you guys know, in 2024, the Nobel Prize in Medicine for discovering was won by Victor Ambros and Gary Rifkin for discovering the microRNAs, and which are tiny RNAs that regulate genes by turning them on and off. So I would say that these are like the master regulators of the body, of the genes. And they can basically seek out a specific RNA, like a copy of, the DNA can basically send a specific copy of RNAs and send it to a specific messenger RNA and silence them when they don't want that to happen, when they don't want that protein to be transcribed. So I would say like they're like very precise scissors, kind of. And here's the connection to time. So many of the proteins that mRNA targets are like the very writers, readers, and erasers of the epigenetic code itself. So I think that if we can play with these microRNAs, we can essentially sort of like alter the cell's destinies or alter the cell's time. So this is just the mechanism of microRNAs, but I'm not going to go too into it. So, yeah, so for example, this is a diagram about the epigenetic marker, the epigenetic writer of a protein called DNMT1. And basically, what it does is that it methylates DNA after time, when cells age, like methylation is added. However, the microRNAs we can alter the levels of microRNAs that express this aberrant epigenetic modifiers, and basically remove or reduce the epigenetic markers that happen in our cells. So by doing this, we're technically not going in one direction of the cells are not going in one direction of time, but rather two ways. So in my interpretation, I think that mRNAs are one of the things that can act as a remote to travel back into time and reverse the effects of mistimings and essentially rewind epigenetics. So, this is the last slide. So yeah, so I'm very grateful that I landed into this research topic because I feel like it kind of gave me peace, because on the very reason why I started science and started pursuing biochem in the beginning. And oh yeah, we have a little bit of time, so this is like my research. I'm not going to go into deep to it, but basically I make these things called PPR proteins that target specifically to the mRNAs that I want, and these mRNAs can control the levels of proteins expression in cells. So for example, my research is about Alzheimer's actually. So I'm trying to increase the level of SIRT1 protein right here. So SIRT1 protein is like a neuroprotection protein, which means that if there's an overexpression of these protein in the cell's age or its flexibility towards stress increases, so we want more of it. But in Alzheimer's patient, this level of protein is usually reduced or decreased as a side effect. So I target the microRNAs that interact with this protein and try to increase the modulation of the expression of this protein. Try in hopes to increase the cell's resilience when it's exposed with high level of amyloid beta proteins. I'm gonna leave it into that. I don't want to go further, but yeah, I think that's it. And thank you very much, everyone. So if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, floor is open for questions. Okay. Oh, yes, thank you. Really.
So thank you for that very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it. Since you said something about Alzheimer's, which I have some personal connection, just having seen my father and my father-in-law suffer from Alzheimer's. So there's been a lot of mention of beta amyloid, I think, in the news. But I'm just wondering, what is your opinion on causality? Like, is it there because of a particular cause of this, or is it just happened to be there and something else is happening? I'm just curious about your interpretation of the science.
So, from my opinion, there are two types of Alzheimer's. Like, the first one is the late onset Alzheimer's, and the other one is the early onset Alzheimer's. So for the early onset Alzheimer's, I know that 95% of the early onset Alzheimer's patient, they're diagnosed, and a lot of their diagnosis can be contributed to genetics. 95% of it is contributed to genetics. However, for the late onset Alzheimer's, less than 5% is actually contributed to genetics. So personally, I think there's a lot of things going on in the epigenetics. So by that, so like environmental contributions, for example, a healthy lifestyle, a healthy diet, I think really contributes. However, the molecular mechanism of Alzheimer's to this point has not been elucidated. So it's really complicated, and I think it's just an accumulation of so many things. And then however, the end product is always beta amyloid accumulation. Like, that's kind of like the pinpoint, or tau pathology, like those two. But then the actual reason or the cause, and if I were just to talk to someone, how can I reduce my likelihood of getting Alzheimer's? Just live a healthy life, I would say. But then the rest is you can't really predict. Yeah, I think that's my interpretation. I hope that answers.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll go back here.
So, having done an internship in a chronobiology lab, I had a question. Like, the lab which I was, interning in, they were mostly focusing on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and they were actually researching if there is a connection between sleeplessness, or let's say sleep deprived, where people used to sleep less. Do this habit of them contribute to a fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is currently incurable, right?
Yeah.
So I think that what you said was most likely connected with almost every disease than just Alzheimer's. So, I mean, it's more of a comment, or let's say it's not a question, but do you think it's true that any disease that is, it exists, is connected to the circadian rhythm of the cell?
Thank you so much for your comment. I think I agree with what you said. The talk that I mentioned is not specifically for Alzheimer's, or sleeplessness doesn't specifically cause Alzheimer's or cancer, but it's actually an attribute to a lot of diseases, actually, maybe including fatty livers, maybe. But just from the logic of it, like the general logic of it, sleep is the time where the body disposes of a lot of toxins. It kind of reboots. It's when our hardware reboots, just when you reboot your laptop. So I think if there's an error or there's a lack of this, automatically there is going to be some sort of toxin left over in your body, right? So I think for me that sort of logic is sound. That's why I think that the effects of a flawed circadian rhythm can affect an array of diseases, not just the major ones. I think it's a lot of different diseases.
Right. I also had one question for you. So you mentioned that the light that enters from the eye contributes to the circadian rhythm, right? So when we see a lot of light in the night, does that also affect our circadian rhythm in some way or the other?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yes, that's why I think, if I'm not mistaken, like some people choose to sleep with a red light because that basically induces your brain to think that, oh, it's time to wind down, it's time to sleep. So even if you're overstimulated, a lot of people sleep with the red light to kind of calm their body down. Yeah.
But isn't like in the night it's more like the blue spectrum of light, if I'm not wrong?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure, but I've heard of people sleeping with a red light. So that's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great.
Let's see. Zach.
You showed us the results of sleep research, where people kept in isolation had a day length of 25.4 hours. Is there any theory as to why it's not 24?
I think when the body thinks that when there's no input of light, I think the body just thinks that, oh, it's not rest yet. You're always on mode. But of course, like, the body can't just automatically turn into like never sleeping machine, right? So it gradually does that by increasing it from 24 to 25. But I think essentially it's just that the body thinks that it's not night yet. You're not supposed to sleep, so it's always on mode. That's why it increases from 24 to 25.
Thank you.
That was actually the first time I heard of epigenetics, so that was really interesting. Thank you. Actually, he already asked, your second question was my question, so I'll ask a more applied version of it. Are we all screwing up our epigenetics by sitting here in style while it's dark outside?
Well, it's still not even 8. Yeah, so I think it's fine as long as we have enough sleep. I guess like the recommended 8 hours of sleep. I don't think it's a problem. I think too much sleep is not good. So yeah, thank you very much for the question.
David.
You spoke about the circadian rhythms and the daily timing of human body, but what about the long-term timing of the human body over the lifespan?
Biological
The biological clock and the relationship to aging and the possibility of slowing down aging or reversing it. Can you say something related to that?
I think that's really related to epigenetics. So, like when the body is exposed to a lot of environments, like a lot of different stimulus, and of course, like especially the world that we live in, there's so many bad things, but at the same time, there's also good things. But like these bad things, they affect our body a certain way, and they accumulate. And when they accumulate, they basically tag your DNA when doing that. So, for example, you're exposed to this sort of chemical, and then it tags the DNA with the epigenetic markers. And the accumulation of the epigenetic marker can actually predict the biological age. So I think there's a lot of research actually nowadays that you can actually predict someone's biological age through their epigenetic markers. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
And then
So also about the circadian rhythm, and you know, when just after birth, a baby's rhythm is terrible. Well, that's circadian. So under the free run conditions, the sleep and wake and sleep cycle is so short, and gradually getting longer and longer. And I'm not sure when, but when adults, we have a circadian rhythm. So rhythm, or what kind of rhythm is from the birth, beginning from the birth and already set up, and what kind of rhythm that we learned after birth?
Oh. Personally, I think it's innate within our DNA for babies to have that sort of rhythm. Personally, I think. Because when you're that small, there's so many things you have to develop, right? So it's only natural that the sleep time is a lot more extended, I feel. But I think when the development regresses or when it stops, then the body no longer think that 20 hours of sleep is necessary. And I think that's when the circadian rhythm becomes what it is now. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, well, it's very natural. We learned as a medical doctor, I learned that after just birth, the rhythm, the biological clock is so, and getting longer and longer, and finally just like an adult. But I didn't think about why that happens. The phenomena is already known, the long time, but why that happened, I didn't know, so ask that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, hey, that's a good time there to end things. So please give another round of applause to staff.